Mario Odyssey is probably still the best Mario game out there, at least for me. It had so much jam-packed into this game, from the worlds, the enemy design, to the levels. Everything was just pretty much perfect, but I think the bosses actually could have been a lot better. Yes, I'm sorry, I just said blasphemy upon Mario Odyssey, but it's true. If you played through Mario Odyssey, you'll know a lot of the bosses are pretty easy to beat, and they're pretty kind of straightforward, and there's only a couple that really do take it to the next level. So what I decided to do today is not make new bosses, but rather take the bosses that are already in game and try to make every single one better. Even ones that already were really good, I'm going to make them better by adding a new move or something different about their moveset. I'll also be coming up with a more unique way to kill them, and yes, that means every single boss in the game. But if you guys enjoyed this video, I will definitely make more with different bosses from different Mario games and just different games in general from Nintendo, and talk about how the bosses could be better. But thank you so much for tuning in, and if you liked the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Nintendo all the time. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. So first, we're starting off with Knucklotec, because I don't want to start off with the Broodals yet. I want to kind of do them all at the end in their own category. But Knucklotec was actually really cool, and as the first boss fight goes, it was pretty interesting. You capture the fist and pretty much punch him in the face, but of course, it's just kind of the same thing 3 times. Yes, it gets a little bit more difficult as he moves his head around and throws blocks of ice at you, but I wish they did a little bit more, and I have some ideas of what they actually could have done. First off, what if Knucklotec just had more hands? What if every time you hit him, he gained 2 more hands, by the end having a total of 6 different hands? And you had to hit him multiple times in the head, not just one punch. You had to punch him once to break a wall of ice, and then again jump off, immediately capturing another fist, hitting him multiple times. Then you can kind of chain different hand captures one after the other. That would be pretty sweet. Or what if after the hands, it got different types of body parts? For instance, like a giant leg or different feet, and you get to capture the feet and like kick them next and stuff like that. That would be actually really cool, and eventually capturing the head, and maybe you have to headbutt another part of his body or something. Maybe just controlling different pieces of his body would be really different and unique, and it would have kind of spiced things up a lot more. The last idea I had kind of gave me Minish Cap vibes. What if you were actually able to climb inside Knucklotec after knocking him out with the fist? That would be really cool, and Link did this with Mazal, which once he was knocked down, he was able to get Minish and climb inside and hit different terminals in order to break him down from the inside. That'd be really cool. Imagine if Mario could knock him out and then the nose ring popped out, allowing Mario to climb in his nose or inside of his mouth, which had a giant area in order for you to break something inside. Or what if, with his mouth being open since he was knocked out, you're able to fly a bullet bill and launch it into his mouth? You capture a bullet bill and line it up and jump out at the right time in order to have the bullet bill fly into his mouth and detonate. That would be really cool, especially considering the fact that you use bullet bills all the way to get to this boss arena in the first place. Next up, we have Torque Drift, and this one hurts so much because Torque Drift was seriously one of the worst bosses in a long time because it had so much potential. It was this giant UFO alien ship type thing, and I thought it was going to be crazy, and it just kind of let us all down, let's be honest. Torque Drift was not hard at all, and the way to defeat him was just so boring. I think they can definitely spice this up a lot. Now, the whole section where you're dodging the lasers as an uproot is pretty cool, but I wish they would kind of expand on this. Maybe it shifts the camera and it shows a whole bunch of lasers that you have to get all the way across the room without hitting a laser, and maybe you can do this as just Mario, so that way you can kind of dive over lasers, crouch, kind of roll underneath them, and kind of make your way to the other side of the room towards the uproot. Once you get the uproot, you can then go to the block section, which then requires you to not just go straight up and hit the power sources, but instead, maybe you have to carefully calculate the bricks and see which part you go up and which part you have to hit. Maybe one of the parts of the brick is actually a spiked ball that will hurt you, and you'll have to kind of go up the exact brick in order to not get hurt. That way it's not just a random shoot yourself up and hit the power source. This would greatly improve the boss battle against Torque Drift and make it very much more interesting. Now, Mecha Wiggler was actually pretty good, but it was just a very slow fight. When he charged at you, it just took too long to actually get your chance to attack him again, and there was lots of just sitting around and waiting for him to stop attacking because they weren't that powerful of attacks. But what if they had different phases? What if the first phase had Mario climbing the tower and hitting different parts of his body with a ground pound, or just kind of throwing different things at him from a distance as he got to the top of the tower? And then he fell off the tower for phase 2. And for this phase, one of the only things that I think I would change is the different arenas. Maybe after you hit him the first time, it takes Mario to a different part of the city with different terrain for the caterpillar to climb on. Instead of just climbing on, base walls, maybe there's different types of buildings and stuff that you can go up around and around different poles and towers, making it a lot more difficult to hit your shots. And it would do this 2 extra times, sending you to 2 extra locations in New Donk City, which would be really cool in my opinion. And I think they could also add some different enemies, or maybe different sections sections of his body pops off and works as like their own version of tanks, so that way you had different things to worry about instead of just the Mecha Wiggler itself, and you had to defend yourself against his enemies and the different attackers coming at you as well. The first fight with Bowser, I think I would not even change at all. I think it was extremely good, and this one's going to be really hard for me to come up with something different. But I think Bowser's airship could have had more influence. It could have been shooting different cannonballs and stuff down during the battle, making it a lot harder for Mario to dodge them. Or maybe different bullet bills that Mario could actually capture and knock Bowser down for a different type of hit, giving the player more options and different ways to defeat Bowser. That would be pretty cool, but overall, for the first battle with Bowser in this game, they did a really good job, and I think just adding the airship and making it more present could be really one of the only things that they could do to make this a little bit more different and a little bit more difficult, because this was just absolutely beautiful of a first Bowser boss fight in the game. I mean, shoot, they even had Bowser change up his attack pattern at the end and actually trick Mario and throw in a tail swipe instead of just letting him punch him, which was just a really unique touch. Next up in the Seaside Kingdom, we have Mollusque-Lanceur. It's really cool how you have to defeat this guy and knock him down off of his tower in the very beginning by hitting the different buttons and shooting the different corks, but I wish they kind of took this a bit further and there was more corks that you could actually shoot at him. For instance, what you have to do first is wash all the lava off of his head, which is really cool, but then after you do that, the lava doesn't come back. Instead, you're just kind of squirting high pressurized water at his head, and it's just kind of hurting him, and it just, to me, doesn't make as much sense as just washing the lava off his head did, and I think they needed to add a step to this. Maybe you wash the lava off his head, which then sends him into an irate. You then have to find one of the corks and bounce it off of his head by shooting it like it's a cannon. Once you hit him as he's moving across the stage, which could be very difficult to do, by the way, but once he's knocked out, you can go up to him, capturing him, and then bumping him into a wall really hard in order to hurt him, and you can repeat this process 3 times. So for a quick recap, step 1, wash the lava off of his head, step 2, shoot a cork, and when he's in an irate, knock him out, and step 3, of course, capture him and ram him into a nearby structure. Cookatiel was another boss from Super Mario Odyssey that I thought was done actually really well. You're in this giant pot of soup with different types of vegetables and pieces of food everywhere. Then eventually Cookatiel will spit out some type of soup lava goop at Mario, allowing Mario to climb up it as his lava ball self and eventually hit Cookatiel in the head, which I think is actually a super cool concept, especially as the stream changes each round. But I think they should add another part to this. In order to get him to spit this lava, maybe at first Cookatiel flies around the top of the pot and you get to see its shadow, and what you have to do is cook up a certain spot in order to shoot food up at Cookatiel. For instance, if you spun around a piece of food or spiked ball in the pot, it eventually would steam up, get cooked, and shoot up in the air, hitting Cookatiel, making him dizzy, then allowing him to spit out his fiery goop, allowing you to follow up with the basic attack that's already in the boss fight. That would be pretty cool. The only thing would be showing people that you can actually do that by giving them kind of like an on-screen prompt, or, you know, saying something within the game that shows that you can actually do that. Maybe it's even part of the game that they eventually added. Like for instance, maybe in the overworld you could actually spin around things in the lava, cooking it up and shooting it out, and maybe that's a vital part of getting to the top of the mountain in the first place. Now, I thought the Lord of Lightning boss fight was actually extremely boring. I thought what they have created with this dragon was phenomenal, and then they just had a very basic boss fight where you're dodging lightning and ground pounding on its head. They could have just done so much more, and this dragon is way stronger than just sitting there and letting Mario jump on his head. So I kind of want to just scrap this entire thing and add a different method of fighting him entirely. What if Mario had to fight him with the Odyssey along with Cappy? For instance, the Odyssey had to fly through the air and you were in charge of maybe just kind of shooting at it, or I don't know, doing something within the Odyssey. That would have been a lot cooler, and you had to fight him flying throughout the sky. Then once you shot him out of the air, you could bring him down to the fighting platform, and then you go throughout that part where you have to dodge all the electricity and then take the shackles off of his head, which then allows Mario to capture the Lord of Lightning. Mario can then capture him and ram him into Bowser's ship, or maybe into pillars that surround the area by flying through the sky with him. This process then can be repeated 3 separate times, and that would be a really unique way to fight the Lord of Lightning, making the stage more gigantic and deserving of this boss fight. For instance, it is a gigantic dragon. We shouldn't just be dealing with his head, but I would love to see the giant scope of this dragon flying through the air, using the Odyssey as well, just combining this all to be an amazing boss fight. I think they could have done a lot better. Now, Mecha Broodal was probably my favorite part of the entire game, probably the best boss fight too. This was just amazing. I love scaling a giant robot and hitting the different parts of the body in order to break the different control consoles that the Broodals are in. And I still feel like they could have done a little bit more to make this even more exciting, because once you did it, it was kind of rinse and repeat 2 or 3 more times. So, I wish that they would have changed up the way you attacked it. For instance, maybe eventually the legs pop off and it starts flying, meaning that you now have to aim your bomb shots. Maybe there's pieces of debris and pieces of the leg on the ground, and you'll have to shoot the bombs to ramp off of the legs and hit the robot Broodal in mid-air, allowing it to crash back down and you climb back up it once again. That would be really cool, and then maybe at the very end, you get to climb inside of the thing and tackle some type of piece inside or something like that. But I think I'll stick to more of the side of just letting the thing fly in the air and aiming your shots a lot better. This would be cool, and this way it takes the emphasis off the legs as much instead of just shooting bombs right back at it. Instead, this time you have to actually calculate your shots, which I think would be really cool. The Broodals are a lot like the Koopalings, where they're supposed to be just little boss battles that you fight them here and there, and they're not supposed to be anything grand, and I think they fill their role pretty well. Topper is really good. I think it's really cool how you can actually find him in his hidden hat, as it's kind of like a pay attention type of game and find the hidden, bunny in the hat. I think it's pretty cool. I think he could do a couple of other things. Maybe if he had like a magic hat that he could pull different things out of, like a magician almost. But I think it's cool that he has a whole bunch of hats and you had to kind of break them all off his head and hit him. I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. Maybe there's even a scene where you can kind of hit his hat back and forth, kind of like a volley thing, and eventually hitting him in the head. I don't know, but for the most part, I think Topper is a pretty good boss fight. Harriet is pretty good as well. You just kind of throw her bombs back at her, but what if you could maybe even capture her bomb and kind of pull it back like you're pulling her hair and then let go, kind of like the Chain Chomps in a way, snapping her back in the head and blowing the bomb up. Overall, I think it's still fine the way it works, and I think she's actually a pretty decent mini-boss at the end of the day. Rango was pretty good, but once you jumped off his hat, it was kind of like, what's the point? He's kind of like looking for Mario and just never looks up. I wish they actually had him running around the playing field or something, allowing Mario to kind of calculate where to hit him. Now, he doesn't have to run far. Obviously, Mario doesn't have that much momentum and movement when he's in that kind of propeller state. So what if he was just kind of moving in a little bit of a circle where you had to time down your landing and make sure you land right on top of him, instead of just him standing there idle looking for you? I think that would have been a lot better. Speward was easily my least favorite Broodal. He was just so easy to defeat. I mean, seriously, you could cheese him so bad by throwing your hat at him and immediately jumping on his head before he could even attack you. They needed to at least change this cooldown. That would have been a lot better. If they changed the cooldown, things would have been drastically different with this boss battle, simply by preventing Mario from hitting him during his attack phase. But yeah, I mean, seriously, that is the main thing here, because what he does is spit goop all around him, allowing Mario to make a path in order to reach him, which would be a lot better. Now, you fought Madame Broodal twice in this game, and it's pretty much the same the second time as it is the first time, and all you have to do is just knock all the new hats off of the Chain Chomp of hers in order to capture it and blast it into her. Now, what they could have done different is to have maybe multiple different Chain Chomps of hers. Maybe she had 2 or 3 of them on the playing field, which made it a lot more difficult. And maybe you had to even ricochet one off of the other in order to bounce it into her, like you could in some of the challenge rooms. I think that would have made it a lot more interesting instead of just running away from her and then charging up and hitting her. There was really no difficulty in it. So maybe ricocheting and kind of lining up shots with different Chain Chomps would have been a lot cooler. Now, Nintendo has this issue that has you fight Bowser the same way every time when you fight him in a game. For instance, the very first time you fight him is probably the same way you fight him in the very end of the game, just with some new moves. But I feel like they need to finally change this. This is a really good boss fight the first time, but when you do it again, it just kind of, you're ready for it. You know how to beat him and you know what to do, even if he adds more tail swipes. I think they needed to add something more drastic for the entire game. The entire game, you learn how to capture enemies and objects, and I wish they had that as part of the actual battle. That would have made this so much better. Imagine if Mario could capture different things to hit Bowser depending on where he was or what he was doing. For instance, you might need a bullet bill in order to reach him on a high ledge, or maybe a Pokio to climb something to hit him, and just different things like that. Like, imagine ramming into Bowser with Charging Chuck, and just different abilities would be so cool, and would kind of recap the game as a whole. And then finally let you capture the last thing in the game, being Bowser, ending on that great ending scene. Because that part was great, but the actual boss fight with Bowser could have been so much better if it had a whole bunch of captures included in it as well. I just think Nintendo really missed the mark with this one, and that would have been really cool. I mean, the whole gauntlet getting to this Bowser boss fight was a gauntlet of captures that you had to do in order to get through a different maze, and it was just... I really wish this was implemented in the boss fight. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this one, because I definitely think this should have been added. And that is all the bosses from Super Mario Odyssey if they were amped up a little bit and changed to make their boss battles a lot better. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm not saying that every boss on this list was just bad or anything, but I was just adding a potential move for all these bosses to show how they could have been potentially better. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with any of these and if you would add anything of your own to any of these bosses, and thank you so much for tuning in. Leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Mario Odyssey and Nintendo in general. And I'll see you all on the next one. See you guys.